So I've had the GH5 now for over a month, enough time for me to give you guys my thoughts and opinion on it. You might even want to call this a little mini review. Now, I'm not going to talk about any specs or anything like that. You guys can look that information up on the web. What I do want to do is talk about real world usage, what I like about the camera, what I don't like about the camera. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. So let's go ahead and talk about the things that I love about the GH5. The articulating screen. I don't know why other manufacturers don't take this approach. This is by far one of my favorite features on the GH5. It's useful, the fact that you can move it up and down, left and right, and you can even swing it around so you can see yourself is something that I've really enjoyed about this camera. If you're a vlogger, if you're looking to vlog, this is a great feature. This also supports touchscreen, so you don't have to fiddle around the menu. If you want to, move the shutter speed or the aperture or anything like that, you can just do it all with your finger. And it also supports tap to focus, which the focusing is pretty good, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So the second thing I like about this camera is IBIS. Now, for those of you that don't know what that stands for, it is in-body image stabilization. What that does is it reduces shakiness, motion blur. It looks really smooth whenever you're moving the camera. Now, even if you adapt a lens that doesn't have OIS, optical image stabilization, it will still look very smooth. In fact, this is one of the best cameras that I've seen with IBIS. It is really smooth. It looks like it's on a gimbal. Now, you add a little bit of warp stabilizer on top of that, and this thing looks like it's on rails. Now, the third thing I like about the GH5 is battery life. The battery life is really good. I mean, it's not legendary like Canon, but it doesn't suck like Sony. Sony has the worst battery life on their cameras, and it's probably why they give you 2 batteries instead of just 1. I can pretty much do a whole entire shoot with just 1 battery on the GH5, and if you add another battery, you could pretty much get through the whole entire day if you're doing an event. Now, the fourth thing I like about the GH5 is the fact that you can record 10-bit 422 internally. The GH4 required an external recorder to do this. Now, this is a big deal if you're doing professional work, especially in broadcast. It requires a 10-bit and above workflow. Neither Sony or Canon have a mirrorless or DSLR camera that can do 10-bit 422 externally, let alone internal. And finally, the last thing I like about the GH5 is the ability to use an adapter to mount Canon glass. I'm a Canon shooter, I own Canon cameras. I've invested a lot of money on Canon lenses. So the fact that I can use a GH5 as a B cam and mount a Canon lens to it, something that I really like. Now, let's talk about the things that I don't like about this camera. Now, understand that what I don't like doesn't necessarily mean it may apply to you. Remember, this is what I don't like. And the first being the sensor. It's a micro 4/3 sensor. It is very small compared to something like most cinema cameras, which is a Super 35, or even larger formats like a full frame sensor like the A7S II or even the A7R II. So what does this all mean and why should you care? Well, for one, it's not going to be that great in low light compared to the legendary A7S II, which is a beast, or even something like the A7R II. Both of these cameras are full frame, and micro 4/3, because it's so small, you're going to have a much larger crop, approximately about 2 times the crop. So when I was using the 12 to 35 millimeter to vlog, I thought 12 millimeters, I mean, that's pretty wide, but when you add that 2 times crop, you're looking at a 24 millimeter focal length equivalent to a full frame, which is pretty large. So you're either gonna have to stretch your arms to vlog, or you're just gonna need a much wider lens. So the second thing I didn't like about the GH5 was the display. Now, I'm not talking about the articulating part of it, I'm talking about the display itself. In direct sunlight, it was very bad. I could barely see the display, so it's not that bright. The other thing was the colors. The colors just seem a little bit off. My 501 is calibrated and I compared them side by side and they were just slightly off. I don't know if you can maybe change it or, try and, I'm sure you can. It's just a small little complaint, mainly on the actual brightness of it. It's not that great and it's kind of a little bit annoying, especially when you're using it outside to vlog. So the third thing I didn't like about the GH5, and definitely going to be more of a personal preference, is the ergonomics. For me, it was not a comfortable camera to hold. Even compared to my 5D Mark IV, which is bigger and slightly heavier, I don't know, just everything about it, like the button placement. I kept hitting the little scroll wheel, which kept changing my shutter speed when I was vlogging. So sometimes I was like at 1/60th and then 1/40, all because I was accidentally moving it. I don't know, again, this is all personal preference. I'm not a big fan of it. I feel like other cameras are much more comfortable to hold. But again, this is going to vary from person to person. And finally, the last thing I really wasn't impressed with was the autofocus. Now, in my testing, it wasn't as bad as some people make it out to be. It was actually a lot better than I thought, but again, it's not as good or as amazing as Canon's dual pixel autofocus, or even, Sony. Sony has a really good, autofocusing system too. Now, if you're mainly working with manual focus or manual lenses, then you really don't have to worry about anything. Personally, for me, sometimes I do rely on autofocus because I'm doing run and gun stuff. I'm vlogging, or let's say, for example, I'm gonna use a gimbal and I need to rely on autofocus. Again, it's not terrible, it's just not as fast and as reliable as other cameras. So last week I headed out to Cine Gear and I took the GH5 with me. I thought about doing a vlog, a little behind the scenes for you guys. Now, what was cool about this event, and you guys are gonna see for yourself, is that I was really able to test out the GH5's capability in just about every single part of environment. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. When I got there, it was very hot, 90-degree weather. And you guys are gonna see from the image quality, like the highlights are not blown out. The dynamic range on this camera is very good. And then a couple of vendors had their booths inside these like sound stages. So I went inside, and obviously it's a lot darker, so you guys can see like the GH5, how it works in low light, which is actually not bad. It's actually pretty good. And then some vendors like Red and Panavision, they had a couple of like makeshift sets that looked like, like a movie. So I was able to kind of get in there and, show you guys what the GH5 is able to produce in a professional environment. And I was, hand holding the camera the whole time, so there was like no gimbal, so you guys can see like how amazing IBIS works with this camera. So anyhow, guys, just check this out. Check out this little sneak preview of Cine Gear, which was all shot with the GH5.
Love me, she do. Let me fly away with you. For my love is like the wind, and wild as wind.
So let's go ahead and go to the Panasonic booth. They have a brand new camera, Super 35, 5.6K, shoots 10-bit 422, and it's actually right there.
Poor little box.
So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys have any questions, leave me a comment down below. I think the GH5 is a really great camera, especially at its given price point. I think it offers a lot of features that most people are looking for. I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect camera. Every camera is gonna have a flaw, so you're just gonna have to pick and choose what works best for you. Follow me at Mondo Bites at pretty much every social network if you guys wanna watch or keep up with me and a little bit behind the scenes. Thanks again for watching, and you will catch me in the next one. Adios.
Love me, she do. Let me fly away with you. For my love is like the